big sky, big potential. In association with Mills and Reeve, this is Eastern Promise. Achieving more together. Welcome to episode 76 of the Eastern Promise podcast, sharing the full potential of the East of England in science and technology, energy and creativity within our region and all across the world. The pressure for more laboratory space in Cambridge is well known. The Greater Cambridge Planning Portal is bursting with applications for conversions of various premises into labs. Whilst the government's Cambridge 2040 plan has proposed new R&D space and 250,000 houses, could the wider region offer Cambridge a better, greener and more cost-effective solution? Eastern Promise convened 2 expert roundtables to find out. And finally, whether you buy from a fixed kiosk, mobile shop or trestle table, tell me about the market that meets your needs in another crowd sorcery. Ironically, whilst Cambridge aims to be the best small city in the world, it represents opportunity and potential so massive, it defies cliché. The government recognises this potential and announced its Cambridge 2040 plan for new R&D space alongside 250,000 new homes earlier this year. There was, it's fair to say, a decidedly mixed reaction. But that got me thinking, what if there's a better way? Whilst labs naturally want to cluster in Cambridge, could much of the housing the city really needs, along with new locations for the warehousing, offices and advanced manufacturing that's being displaced from Cambridge, be accommodated elsewhere in the east of England? Is there, in short, a way to support growth in Cambridge so that everybody wins? Eastern Promise thinks there is, and that part of the Cambridge-Norwich Tech Corridor in the Norfolk Brecks from Attleborough through Snetterton and down to Thetford has the unique potential to deliver a sustainable win-win. And so, with the support of Breckland Council, we convened 2 expert roundtables to explore this in more detail. First up, my panel and I discuss the needs of Cambridge and the strategic opportunity at hand. We are indebted to the fantastic people at Breckland Council for providing us the Kingfisher Room, where a wonderful group of people who are going to mould and shape this really exciting discussion are now sitting. And I'll ask them all to introduce themselves in a minute. This is going to be the first of 2 panels. And what we're here to do is to look at what I believe, and Eastern Promise believes, is the huge potential of a specific slice of Norfolk geography to support growth in Cambridge. And we've got some really knowledgeable players who we're honoured to have around the table to help us do that. Just for those who don't know, Eastern Promise is a community interest company. This podcast is our main way of communicating with people, both in this region and around the world. Outside England, our main market, believe it or not, is Virginia in the United States. Hello, Virginia. We believe that there has never been a better time than this to work, to live in the east of England. We've got life sciences, we've got renewable energy, we've got creative industries absolutely firing on all cylinders. This is a wonderful place to be. So, without further ado, I will ask the panel to start introducing themselves for this first panel, starting with Rob.
Yes, thank you, Mike. Yes, Rob Hopwood. I'm a partner in the planning team at Bidwells in Cambridge and have been a town planner for about 36 years. So I've seen a lot of plans come and go, but I'm heavily involved in the Oxford to Cambridge growth corridor and have been for many years, in fact, since 1995. And I've seen a lot of changes in more recent years for the positive, and hopefully I can bring some of that information to help with considerations in this area.
That's fantastic. Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris Starkie. I'm the Director of Growth and Investment at Norfolk County Council. So my work covers skills, economic growth, inward investment, and also infrastructure development. And for a number of years, I've been part of a team looking at and trying to maximise the potential of the links between Cambridge and Norwich.
Sarah?
Thank you. I'm Sarah Suggitt, the Deputy Leader of Breckland Council, and I also live and work in Breckland.
Fantastic. Matt?
Hi, so I'm Matt Samways. I'm the MD of a company called Inuti, which is a design, engineering and architecture firm which has been established in the science and tech market for 50 years. Our experience is mainly with corporates, so global pharma and global corporates, so more on a wider scale than just this region, but obviously do a lot of work in the triangle, or as we refer to it. Also director of a separate company, Tion, which designs and manufactures fume hoods and fume extraction, which goes into primarily wet chemistry and laboratory buildings. We've seen a lot of change in the since March 2020, and that change brought on obviously by the pandemic has shifted the real estate landscape, both from a workspace perspective, and is having an enormous effect on, we're badging it life science, but it's not just per se life science, it's the science and tech market that we refer to, which is creating a number of opportunities, on a wider scale, but more on that later, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that, because obviously Breckland is, as anyone who's walked through these corridors will know, has really sort of embraced that and is a really created, if I may say so, a really positive workspace out there for people to enjoy. I'd just like at this point to ask Engineer 49 over in the corner to grab his boom mic, because I'm going to ask, there are two people who are sort of going to be part of the second panel who are listening intently to what we're saying. And they are Anna.
Hi, Mike. I'm Anna Aldous, a Principal Associate at Mills & Reeve. I'm a real estate development lawyer, and I specialise in predominantly large-scale mixed-use schemes, so the kind of urban extensions we'll hopefully be talking about today. M&R has offices in Norwich and Cambridge, so this is a topic really close to our hearts and something that we're really passionate about in seeing growth in the eastern area.
Excellent. And Paul.
Good morning, Paul Downing here from Snetterton Park, the former Sunday market along the A11. We purchased the site in June 2017, and we're now working to roll out development of the site. It's a 65-acre site into a thriving business park.
And listening to us silently also is Andrew Holdsworth, Assistant Director of Growth from Breckland Council. But we won't ask him to chip in at this point. Well, let's get things underway. Sarah, first of all, can I ask you to give, for those who aren't familiar with the site of geography we're talking about, so really from Attleborough on that A11 stretch down to Thetford and where the roundabout kind of transfers you from Norfolk into Suffolk, could you just give us a very brief pen picture, if you would, of that area?
Yeah, of course. We've got 500 square miles of Breckland as a district council. We've got some of the most beautiful rural landscapes and 5 of the most wonderful market towns, 2 of which we're really lucky to have in the area what you've just suggested along that Cambridge-Norwich Tech Corridor. We're really proud that Thetford is the gateway into Norfolk, and we'd like to see that opportunity monopolised between Thetford, Snetterton, Attleborough. We've got some great potential. As Paul said, we've got about 150 acres of space available for businesses to come in and to grow between Attleborough and Thetford. We've got 2 urban extensions that have got planning permission, with around 10,000 new homes within the next 5 to 20 years being scaled out. It's a really lovely place to be. We've got Thetford Forest on our doorstep. We've got some lovely cultural heritage assets around where we live. So that work-life balance is something which we can really capture. That section of the A11, I think, is a really great potential for us all to monopolise.
Absolutely. I interviewed Sam Chapman-Allen, the leader of Breckland, about Thetford, and took a walk with then manager of the Greater Thetford Partnership along the river, looking at all the, the really fantastic sites of potential, of heritage in Thetford. But one of the things that I think is striking about that particular slice of Norfolk geography is the fact that it is connected to Cambridge directly by rail as well as road. But this isn't just a discussion about Norfolk, it's also a discussion about Cambridge, what Cambridge wants, what Cambridge needs. And at this point, I'm going to bring in Rob and ask us to give us an idea of where it's been all over the news lately. We've got the Cambridge 2040 plan coming out from the government. Where is Cambridge today, and where's those points of need that need to be fulfilled?
Yeah, that's a very big question, Mike, but I can sort of try and summarise it over the last few years of what's been going on. I mean, obviously, Cambridge has got some unique selling points of its own in itself. A world-leading university in the top 3 in the world in the last 10 years. We've got the University Hospital at Addenbrooke's. We've got the Biomedical Campus, and obviously all the other science campuses in what we call the Southern Cluster, which is to the south of Cambridge. That's Hinxton, the Genome Project, Granta Park, and Babraham Research Campus. Obviously, the science park on the north side of Cambridge is almost full, and there's need to go beyond that. But that's Cambridge in itself, and why that's a great place to be. We've got to watch about the quality of life, but talk of big plans go beyond the bounds of the town. So we're looking at the bigger picture with Michael Gove's recent announcements it would be quadrupling the size of Cambridge if you looked at the geography. So what I'm trying to do is bring my knowledge and our company's knowledge from the Oxford to Cambridge corridor, work we've done over the last 10, 15 years, and see what we can learn from that and how Norfolk can benefit from it. And what I would say is essentially, Norfolk should not try and compete with Cambridge, but complement what Cambridge is doing. Because you can't really compete with it, because the world's investors want to be in the thick of Cambridge and on the edge of Cambridge, because clustering of ideas, innovation, science and tech has to be very close together. So, you shouldn't look at the weaknesses of the area and try and improve the weaknesses. Look at the strengths of what you've got. And I'm not just thinking about Breckland here. You need to talk to your neighbours, because we're talking about a corridor between Cambridge and Norwich. And of course, there's a couple of authorities that cross that. There's been some problems with politics, but obviously things go on in spite of politics. And a lot of private sector companies, institutions, academia, all work together and collaborate to get things done. And what I refer to that is what we call the triple helix, which is academia, private sector and public sector institutions working very closely together to actually deliver things on the ground. So looking slightly wider than Breckland, I like the idea of the string, because obviously A11 and the railway stations, Thetford's exactly halfway between Cambridge and Norwich geographically. And you've got Attleborough. Snetterton, I think, has got great potential. I say no more at this stage.
I'm all about collaboration. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think it was supremely possible. I mean, dangerous at repeating the trick I've seen many an MP do is saying the words "it must be possible" in a very sort of blithe, easy way, whereas it's not always easy, but I come back to, I think it is possible to craft that win-win scenario where everybody, if we get it, if it's possible to get it right, I admit I have absolutely no power other than whatever the opposite of a bully pulpit is to just to inspire and to convene. But Matt, can I ask you to reflect on not only on what Rob said, but also talk about your experience of the Cambridge space and what you feel it needs, and then I'm going to ask Chris to sort of jump in with what can Norfolk offer.
I think as real estate professionals, which, many of us in this room are, there isn't that link necessarily like you'd think between rental growth in our building and, the ability of a building to deliver a laboratory space, for example, and the location. So the location is number one, and it always has been. So I think the question really that we should probably debate or think about is, okay, so where could those organisations come from that might need what Snetterton, Thetford and the areas around there has to deliver? So you've mentioned clustering, and you're never going to get away from that. But what about people that maybe are in the clean tech manufacturing, or the next size up in terms of their growth, or R&D sector companies that maybe now are branching out into small scale manufacturing, things like that? that might be an obvious kind of sector to go and have a look at and do some exploration around. So we debate internally in our own organisation a lot around the buzzwords floating around the market right now, life science being one of them. The demand is actually coming from all sorts of different industry sectors. It's coming from, broadly speaking, energy security. So hydrogen technologies, it's coming from battery material, people that are exploring things around how do we achieve energy security as an economy. And food security is another thing. We built a pilot plant last year for a novel food company who are exploring growing meat in tanks. It's completely, different technology.
I can just hear, hopefully Clark Willis of the Food Enterprise Park is listening to this, and his eyes will light up at that. And I should just say, if there's anybody listening who says, well, why am I part, why couldn't I come along today? Why couldn't I be part of this discussion? I absolutely hope this is not the beginning and end of it. And I'd like to do this again and again and again with as many stakeholders as want to come and be positive. But Chris, let me bring you in at this point, and you're furiously making notes, which is always a good sign. Just reflect on what you've heard and where Norfolk is, and then hopefully we can sort of kick off a discussion that we can...
Well, where Norfolk is, it has an incredible, diverse range of sectors, world-leading expertise, and I think in a way that complements Cambridge's offer. There are things that are being developed in Norwich, along the corridor, on the coast, which actually are sort of practical examples of exactly what just been discussed. So energy sector, the biggest number of cluster of companies and so on in the energy sector is on the East Coast and in Norwich. Hydrogen, electric powered vehicles and so on are being tested. Food security, Norfolk's biggest producer of food in the country and so on, and ICT digital. So I think Norfolk actually has a lot to offer Cambridge. I think there's a belief to an extent that Cambridge is the sun and all the planets revolve around Cambridge. I'd suggest that the world isn't quite as, if you're not in Cambridge, the world doesn't feel quite like that.
No.
The orientation's slightly different, and I think there's big opportunities for, in particular, the research institutes in and around Norwich and Cambridge. They're already collaborating in terms of food security. The research scientists on the Norwich Research Park, the Norwich University Hospital is actually a bigger hospital than Addenbrooke's. It has more patient beds and so on than Addenbrooke's and so on. So the scale of what Norwich has got to offer is sometimes perhaps a little bit overlooked. And that's why the corridor then is such an exciting concept, because if you're Thetford, you are bang in the middle. And I shout out to our Virginia listeners. Of course, that's where Thomas Paine is from. So keeping it relevant to our American listeners.
Thank you, Chris.
And so, I think there's something that worth exploring further is what are the things that Cambridge doesn't have the space to do. And I think you're right in terms of tech manufacturing. There's some really interesting advanced engineering companies in Thetford. It's actually what it's best known for. And along the corridor as well, that I think can probably produce the manufacturing solutions to the kind of bright ideas that are coming out of the labs in Cambridge. So there's some absolute crossover and synergy. And in the same way as some of the bright ideas that are coming out of the labs in Norwich, where do those ideas get manufactured? And certainly there's more of a trend, I think, now to bring manufacture onshore back to the UK, particularly sort of the stage beyond prototyping and so on. So I think there's a huge kind of, if there's a Venn diagram, a kind of sweet spot there.
Exactly the right words. And I took a listener who, Dr. Tammy Dugan, who is Life Science and Healthcare Partnerships Lead at Cambridge University, with me on a tour and a recording around the Quadram Institute on the Norwich Research Park, and she was absolutely blown away. The slightly worrying phrase is, I did not know this was here. So obviously there is a job of work for us all to do there. But it was great to introduce her to Ros Bird and put them in context. It is my mission. I am here to do that.
You are. Your USP is to bring those people together.
I mean, I think Chris was slightly hinting at this, and forgive me, Chris, if I've got you wrong. But Sarah, I mean, to what extent is someone like Breckland able to, I don't want to use the word politically, but it's in there anyway, explore these opportunities in a way that is like, yes, we are open to this collaboration with Cambridge and crafting that win-win?
I mean, we're already home to Baxter Healthcare, the global medical devices manufacturer in Thetford, Multimatic, the global engineering company in Thetford. You know, they're already there, you know, and like you were saying about the size and scale of what they're after, that is something what they've made Thetford their home because it has that potential for them to have been able to grow. Thetford has always been a manufacturing town. It's now a modern manufacturing town, and we're proud to be able to help facilitate some of those conversations what need to be had. But actually, once we've been able to get those people in a room and spaces like this, you know, the business families are really taking care of themselves. You know, as a district council, we've got to be really mindful. We're looking after taxpayers' money. We shouldn't be using that willy-nilly to be going out doing stuff. Well, actually, grown-up conversations can be had without us having to be the person that triggers us all of the time. But we're really proud to support those businesses, to take a pragmatic view when they come to us with a planning application, for example, with growth, scalability. So those are the types of things that I think we can offer as a district, as a council. You know, we've got the likes of Andrew's team out there having those really good connections. One of the outcomes from COVID, which we all would rather have not had to have gone through, but it really gave us the opportunity to get out there and to understand what our businesses, who they were, what they were doing, what their challenges, what their opportunities were. As district councils, you know, it was our responsibility to go out there and get those loans to support those businesses. And we're really proud to have a huge amount of small and medium-sized businesses out there which can support, you know, what it is that we've been talking about today.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. And Rob, could I just ask you to bring sort of your first of all, your Oxcamark knowledge in at this point? And on the one hand, what would you recommend, I suppose? And then I'm going to sort of ask Matt to come in as well and reflect on that. But on the other, in terms of housing, I don't think I've had a high-level conversation in the Cambridge ecosystem with someone who's not said, I live in Norfolk, I live in Suffolk, I live in Essex. So is there an offer that Cambridge professionals are looking for? Because I have huge faith and belief in the potential of particularly Thetford, that historic town centre, Three Nuns Bridge is beautiful, the Castle Mound, you got the riverside with this really great little cinema.
Yeah,
that one up for you.
That's an easy one, isn't it, that subject matter? But, I mean, to summarise it and be quite brief about it, there's issues, very big issues in Cambridge about housing. It's all about the balance between homes and jobs. And of course, there's always more jobs than homes in Cambridge. That's the beauty of Cambridge. But that means people have to commute in. And we have massive problems, even after lockdown. It's going back to the old ways of peak hour traffic. So people are travelling longer and longer to get into work. So, you know, the local politicians and the local plan review that's going on between Cambridge and South Cambs, called the Greater Cambridge Local Plan, is grappling with this. So we have to get the right scale of housing in the right location. Affordable housing is the key. There's never enough, because the workers that work in these campuses, not just the scientists, but the cleaners, the caterers, the maintenance people, they have to live somewhere. So affordable housing is the big issue. Now, Thetford is a big town on that corridor, relatively to others. There's been quite a lot of housing planned there in the past. To get people from Thetford into Cambridge cheaply and efficiently is the key. Because we've got a green belt around Cambridge that's being looked at and scrutinised really closely at the moment with Michael Gove's announcement. Do we break into that, or do we jump beyond it? If you jump beyond it, you've got commuting. So we've got to get people in cheaply, efficiently, quickly from what we call the necklace towns. And I would include Mildenhall, which is obviously West Suffolk, and Thetford in that discussion. So the local plan, which is going to go to 2046, we've got a massive opportunity here. We're early start of the review. A big discussion needs to take place about that. What does Thetford, what's its role going to be, and how will it manage that growth?
Absolutely. And Matt, I know Inuti have looked, and we talked about this earlier, at working from home and the hybrid working model. Now, it seems to me that to have somewhere that's got fantastic natural resources, Thetford Forest, any number of sort of country parks up and down the route, and you've got modern, up-to-date housing, a river, etc. But you're still within easy reach of Cambridge on the train, and if you so wish to drive, but we obviously encourage to use the train. Where does that sit in the work you've done, and how does that sort of relate?
I think if we just zoom out ever so slightly, COVID-19 has shifted the landscape in terms of recruitment, talent, how the workspace operates for most people, and that affects every sector. That's the one commonality we've got. In terms of attracting growth to a region, that's not my field of expertise, but I'd say, is there a way to plug in and listen to where is the demand coming from? Which companies, could we tap into to understand their growth plans and some of the demand? So there's a muted 1 million square feet of unpositioned space in Cambridge right now. Can we plug in to some of that? Can we identify the right organisations that might, be tempted? And then what everyone wants, they want an ecosystem, right? So, a scientist they're working in a lab building still has to live somewhere, still has to eat, still has to, go out and they want the social spaces. And you see this where, the parks around Cambridge, those that have done it really, really well, they're thriving and they get people in, and it's like it's absolutely pumping. And you take parks in Cambridge even that haven't got the amenities quite right, and they can't get the footfall. So if we just zoom out to this area we're discussing, this region, can we take some learnings from that? Can we are the amenities here to get people, to actually relocate or to put their businesses there? And the commuting thing, I can't really comment.
All right, okay.
Because, I think public transport does have a way to go. Both in the way it works and the way it's run and the cost of it. But again, that's a wider subject.
I have spoken to Greater Anglia and asked them about, for example, a half-hourly service from Norwich to Cambridge. But that kind of puts a lot of agency in the hands of the Department for Transport, because you're talking about Ely, you're talking about improving the situation at Trouse, and you're talking about additional rolling stock, all of which are kind of not in our direct, when I say our, I mean the region and the counties they're in, not in our direct gift, which is, But Chris, can I just ask you to reflect on what you've heard, on how we go about building that, alliance is a very grandiose term, but that collaborative partnership, you may already be well advanced in doing this, to deliver that.
I think,
or seize the opportunity rather than deliver.
Looking at it on a number of different levels. So I think there's an education process of people in Cambridge, people in Norwich, people along the corridor understanding who is outside their natural orbit. So Cambridge folk talk about the Cambridge cluster and so on, and quite focused on that. People in Norwich, the same people. How do we get, and measures and steps you're taking, so on, to bring people together who didn't know each other existed in a way, yet they're only half an hour away or an hour away at a push. Think about the scale of Silicon Valley. It's a longer bus ride from one end of Silicon Valley to than it is from Cambridge to Norwich. I can tell you, lot bigger. So how do we bring people together to think about collaboration? So knowing you're there and so on, I think, is the first piece. I think the second thing then is recognising the distinct things that different places can play, the different parts, the complementary parts, and so on. And I think the third thing is going back to what Sarah was saying about developing communities that people want to live in, that people want to be part of. You've made a great great case for Thetford, and people should come and visit it, have a look, and so on, and see it. It's not very. It feels a world apart from Cambridge because it is, but geographically it's not very far. So if you are, and equally it's equidistant to Norwich. So interestingly, we've a number of consultants and so on who are either Addenbrooke's or the NNN and so on who choose to geographically base themselves midway so they can work in either and so on, which is a growing trend and so on. So I think there's something like that. On the hybrid working, I think hybrid working is really interesting for labs and for certain roles. It's clear you've got to be in the workspace, but there's quite a lot of roles where there's an expectation to be physically in the office 1 day a week, 2 days a week, hybrid working and so on. And we've certainly noticed in terms of, and certainly in the jobs market, a number of hires of people turn out. My team turns out somebody actually lives in Leeds, another person lives in Reading, and so on. So I think that there's some interesting things that have evolved around that. But I think it might help to, which certainly should in our experience in Norfolk, is it is starting to help break down that commuting every day in pattern, therefore reduces the traffic inflow and so on. So I think there's something that we can learn to work with. So Cambridge's biggest problem is it's traffic in and out in the morning, isn't it? Actually, if hybrid working was more baked in, then that helps that commuting piece. And that's how you have to pay to drive into Cambridge soon. Anyway, that's going to be interesting as well.
Well, we've also got the Cambridge South coming online, which gives an additional piece of access on the Norwich-Cambridge route. You just obviously, because Cambridge is a through station, you stay on the train, and then you're in the biomedical side of things, which is really exciting. Now, my buzzer's just gone off in my pocket, which indicates that we've reached the half-hour point. So I should probably ring the bell for a changeover. But I'm just going to whisk around very quickly and just ask for, I don't want to use the word final thoughts, but at this stage of the discussion, some thoughts. And I'm going to start with Sarah.
Thank you. No, I just think it's really good that these conversations are being had. No change is going to happen unless things like this, we can have these conversations, we can understand what the opportunities and what the challenges are. We can't all by ourselves make these things happen. It's not all within our own individual gifts. But if we don't start coming together and having these conversations and bringing people that can do and can make a change, things are never going to be any different. So I really appreciate the chance of being able to take part in this. So thank you.
You're very welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'll go to Matt next.
Yeah, no, thanks. No, Chris made a very good point. I think, education, it's needed across the board, I would say, both, from looking at the different sectors, looking at where, the growth is and, the possibilities of this area we're talking about. And, I've moved to Breckland in the last 6 weeks, but I don't know Thetford really at all. So you're talking to someone who, we're discussing an area, but I know of it, but I don't really know its potential or its possibilities. I spend most of my time commuting in and out of either London or Cambridge or trying to get to Oxford. So yeah, no, it's a very, very interesting topic, and absolutely echo and share your thoughts. We need to come together. Businesses need to work with local government more. Yeah, that's really all I got to say.
I think absolutely, and I absolutely recognise local authorities have a statutory responsibility for all of this. I think it behooves us to try and circumvent, cut them out of the loop, and try and work around them. They are key to the discussion, and absolutely support them in being so. That's why they're there, and they are, And I know that, and I'm going to come to Chris next, so he can tell us just about how growth focused and interested in sustainable growth that Norfolk is. But some final thoughts from you, Chris, please.
Yeah, so my final thoughts. I think this has been a really interesting discussion. Because we're so often faced with problems. This feels like a discussion about how we might bring some solutions. So how can we bring some solutions to the potential of Cambridge, its constraints, and actually there are kind of opportunities, I think, for Cambridge close to its doorstep.
Absolutely. I mean, just to go back to the points about Thetford, I actually, once I completed the walk around, and I recommend to you, Matt, the audio tour of Thetford, because the next day I took my daughter back to an area of Thetford called Three Nuns Bridges because of the hot weather and because the water level was at that point really low. and unusually really, really clean, she went paddling. And there was a group of people, like it was a day at the beach, paddling in the water at Three Nuns Bridges. How beautiful, how wonderful! And I at that point, you can probably hear in my voice that the wonders of Thetford, my eyes were, if they weren't already, even more open to those. But Rob, give us your thoughts and expertise at this stage, and then we shall rotate and bring in Paul and Anna to the discussion.
Yeah, just on the point of how you work together to a common aim and objective and to try and deliver something meaningful on the ground. The Oxcam Arc had 30 plus authorities in a group. It's very difficult when you've got all the political colours under the sun all infighting about their own areas. And in fact, as you might have heard, Buckinghamshire County Council extracted themselves from the group. So there was a big hole in the middle. So the ARC Leaders Group was set up. So that's all the leaders of all those authorities. And Barry Wood at Cherwell was at one end. Bridget Smith in our own backyard in South Cambs was at the other. So they're working on economic and environmental strands as we speak. But as you may know, the government's watered down the duty to cooperate between authorities. And now they've set up what they call pan-regional partnerships, PRPs. And that is currently starting up across the Oxford-Cambridge corridor. So what I would suggest is that, despite the talking shop that might take place, you've got to have this collaboration across the corridor. So I would say some form of regional partnership between Cambridge and Norwich is required, and it takes leadership. So we need leaders, county level, to actually come together and say, we're going to make this happen, and not just have a talking shop. So I'll leave it there for the moment, but there's other things I can say about that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the reasons I started with a very close focus is knowing that there's only 2 local authorities involved, and maybe I think it's a momentum thing. And as you bring in people who want to be part of the discussion, who want to say something positive, who want to be involved, that creates its own momentum. You can't, and you. I hope that Eastern Promise goes to people and offers them that opportunity to speak, to have a say, and to be part of the discussion. As I say, we've got no power. I'm accountable to nobody except the people who listen. But I hope that through energy, through enthusiasm, that we actually can help rather than hurt the process of sustainably growing our economy, our region. And I shall leave it at there. Thank you ever so much for being part of this first roundtable. We shall return momentarily with roundtable number 2. But this seems like an apposite moment to invite you all to have a comfort break.
And now we semi-rotate the panel and examine how Norfolk might seize this opportunity.
Part 2 of the panel, and we still have with us Chris and Rob, and we're joined now by Paul Downing from Snetterton Business Park and Anna Aldous, again from our very good friends at Mills and Reeve. Anna, can you reflect on what you heard in the first panel, and then we'll sort of hopefully kick that off into a wider discussion of how we make it happen?
I think first and foremost, it's really exciting, for businesses and for people in Cambridge and in the tech corridor, because Cambridge in particular has seen some exponential economic growth in recent times, some really exciting businesses, really innovative and really world leading. And I think that is now starting to trickle out. And I think Chris made a really good point as well. It isn't the centre of the universe. Norwich has also had some really exciting developments over the past 10 years as well. The Norwich Research Park is, again, world leading. So actually, it's really nice listening to that first discussion and actually be really proud to live around here. I think the thing for me out of the first discussion is that's great and it's exciting. But I think for me, Rob hit the nail on the head when he said it's all about housing now. It's about the ecosystems that sit around and support that. I'm Norfolk born and bred. And for me, coming out of my late 20s into my early 30s, affordable housing was a big issue. Where do I want to locate myself as a professional worker in this area? I split my time between Norwich, Cambridge and London. Cambridge was not a runner for me. And I think, again, that is where the opportunities for growth come in that tech corridor, are things like Thetford, Attleborough, those large-scale urban extensions where we're going to get the meaningful quantity of housing to support the economic growth we've seen in the main hubs. But with that does come its challenges. And for me, part of what I'm really passionate about is turning those spaces into places. How do we make sustainable communities in the long term? And that placemaking piece, I think, is going to be a key challenge to making this really successful going forward.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. And I think it's a bit of a boring cliche I've developed, but I'm going to bore you with it anyway, in that we're going to try in this conversation and sort of narrow our focus a little, but looking more broadly, the Norwich-Cambridge corridor, I've kind of come to view it as a jigsaw puzzle, in that not everything will fit together every which way, but where it does fit together, it can create a really beautiful picture. And I shall stick with that rather pained and strained metaphor, and ask Paul, who is the director of the Snetterton Business Park, to just give us his thoughts on what he heard in part one.
I think what I found really interesting was the conversation around the Norwich to Cambridge Tech Corridor, in so much that I think that's a fantastic vision. I'd like to see it come into fruition, really. And I think we're very lucky, to own a 65-acre park situated between Attleborough and Thetford, because if we talk about affordable housing and people having somewhere nice to live, Snetterton's quite well located for people to live in either of those towns. So I think one of the other points that was raised was Cambridge. We don't have to compete with Cambridge. We need to identify what we can do to support Cambridge and what businesses are running out of space in Cambridge where they could locate at Thetford, Snetterton or closer to Norwich, where we can provide space that's more affordable, and we've got the land on which to develop. Yeah. So I think the vision of the tech corridor is really, really exciting. And I think we just need to collaborate, hold events like this where we get people talking and thinking about how we can all work together to deliver that vision.
That's absolutely fantastic. And I absolutely agree. And Snetterton is a really exciting, and you can't drive past it, I don't think, without getting some sense of the huge potential that's lying there waiting to be unleashed. Now, I'm going to bring in Rob in a second, but before that, I'm going to ask Chris, as we did in his recent interview with Eastern Promise, to just, the tech corridor's obviously been mentioned quite a lot, naturally. Where does the corridor sit as of the recording, and how is that vision being taken forward, which we absolutely wholeheartedly behind on Eastern Promise?
So the vision is around realising the potential of the corridor between Cambridge and Norwich. Cambridge's potential is there. It's more about constraint and how do you deal with the constraints. Norwich, it's one of the 5 fastest growing economies consistently over the last period. So both places are growing. You have a really good dual A11. And you also have space for homes and for businesses, and some really interesting places in Attleborough, Thetford, Mildenhall was talked earlier. Yeah. So the vision was really about how can Cambridge work more closely with partners to the east. Cambridge is in demand as a must-do business with location for obvious reasons. So there's how does it work along the corridor into London, so into the M11 A11 corridor. How does it work? It's courted by Oxford in the western direction, and then through the combined authority collaboration and so on with Peterborough. So it's, if you think of Cambridge as a clock face, it's got opportunities to the north, to the south, to the west. But until we developed the corridor concept, the east was there be dragons. Nobody knew what lived. It may be the place you go on holiday. It may be the place you drive along the A11 in order to get to Burnham Market or to get to the North Norfolk coast and so on. But it wasn't seen as a collaborative place where there were business opportunities, housing opportunities, and so on. And so the genesis of the corridor goes back to Lord Sainsbury, who worked with the 2 county councils, Norfolk County Council and Cambridgeshire County Council, to say actually there's something interesting, particularly around agri-tech. And agri-tech was the first kind of thought behind it, that actually you've got some interesting stuff in Cambridge, but actually the agri-tech expertise, if you added Norfolk's agri-tech expertise, you've got 3 times what you'd have by just Cambridge alone. If you think about food security and food production, the same. The life sciences, there's some interesting stuff. So life sciences in Cambridge tends to be around human life science. In Norwich, it's around plant. It's kind of everything except humans. And, when some time back the Genome Analysis Centre moved from the Sanger Institute in Cambridge up to Norwich, that was kind of proof of that. Actually, you've got 2 poles of a potential corridor, and then colleagues in South Norfolk and Breckland, West Suffolk, all said, well, hang on, we've got this developable land, we've got these opportunities for growth and so on. How about we work together? So that was the genesis of it. I think you alluded to before that when you get lots of different political institutions, people are pulling different directions, different timescales and so on. So there's certainly clarity of vision, but in terms of delivery, the pandemic suddenly appeared and attention's focused on that. And I think we need to sort of redouble our efforts to focus back on what are the key things that as partners we could do together, not trying to do everything, not trying to boil the ocean. And interesting hearing about housing. I'm interested in working with Paul on how we develop Snetterton Business Park, which I think is one of a huge asset for both counties, and actually for all 3 counties if we include Suffolk as well as part of this. So I think we are at a state of work in progress, but events like this really show and highlight the potential. But there are some tangible things that have happened in terms of links between the NRP and Rosberg, and with Cambridge, and working with a number of partners. So I think there are a lot of people who are now doing some of the detail to complement the kind of original vision.
I think you mentioned Lord Sainsbury, and I was fortunate enough to interview Nick Talbot, who is the director of the Sainsbury Laboratory. And he made it clear to me that when it comes to plant science, Norwich is the international leader. Is in a class of its own. You got the John Innes. I put it to him this way, that the John Innes Centre is all about taking plant science and answering some of the key questions of our age, and the Sainsbury Laboratory is making sure that the plants stay alive and thrive to answer those key questions. And he agreed that was a simplistic but accurate overview. Rob, in terms of seizing the potential of somewhere like Snetterton Business Park, and I ask you to say this with Paul sitting very close at hand, what kind of businesses are being displaced? Is there any displacement going on in Cambridge? Businesses saying, I can't stay here, but there's so much demand for labs, we can relocate somewhere else cheaper and then make quite a lot of money on our premises, converting that to lab space. Yeah. How much is that prevalent, and where can somewhere like Snetterton tap into that demand?
Well, it's very prevalent because in the last, say, 3-4 years, the demand for laboratories is so high. In fact, our recent figures only came out this week. We do a half-year data analysis of our commercial floor space in Cambridge, and it was published last week. And 85% of all demand for space is labs. That's a lot. So those sites that are taken for labs tend to be light industrial, general industrial, brownfield sites, ex-farmyards. We're seeing villages within 3 to 5 miles around Cambridge come forward. If you can't get in Cambridge, you want to be close to the edge of it. So also you might have heard the Grafton Centre, which is the second premier shopping centre. We put in a planning application for labs for the whole site. Also the Beehive Centre, which is a retail centre in Cambridge, not far from the Grafton. An application's just gone in for labs on that.
Yes.
So there will be shops and there will be cafes at ground floor level, but above them we're going for labs. So you can just see the demand is so great. Where do we go? So we're displacing all those light industrial units, general industrial parks, storage facilities. They've got to go somewhere else. Now, it's interesting what the conversation's going here, because obviously, if your listeners are really keen to get into the detail of this, Bidwells and Perkins & Will, American architects, produced the Tech Corridor report. It's a 100-page report. It's got graphics, maps, data to look at all the sectors between Cambridge and Norwich. This was done for the New Anglia LEP. So it's an interesting document, and it looks at what the key strengths of this corridor is, and agri-tech, plant science, and are coming on the rails, renewable energies and innovation, environment matters. So we're looking at Great Yarmouth, we're looking at the Suffolk coast, North Norfolk coast, Bacton. We're looking at getting the wind turbines erected on sites, on brownfield sites, and then getting shipped out to the world's largest wind farm. So you can see agri-tech, renewables, environmental stuff really coming forward, working with UEA and other academic institutions. So it's all coming together, and you've got to get the right infrastructure in the right place. So what you said about homes, you've got to have homes right on top of jobs to reduce commuting. You want to create environments, social environments, community is the word, so that people can get out of their house and walk to work or cycle to work. You can do that, if you put your mind to it. And as I say, Snetterton's got brilliant potential, bits of Attleborough as well, and Thetford. You've got to look at these really closely and do a master plan vision for them and just see if it works. Talk to the local players, town councils, big business in that zone, and you can make it work.
I absolutely couldn't agree more. Anna, in terms of assembling something like that, reflect on that and where is, there'll be all the local authorities in the area, and I'm not obviously trying to step on their toes at all, will have plans in place for their own parts of the geography. But how is the best way we can start pulling that all together into either an overarching visions or overarching complementary visions?
I think the key is communication. And it's quite interesting what Rob touched on earlier, where at the minute politically we're rowing back on this statutory duty to cooperate. And ironically, it seems to be happening just at the wrong time. So I think for me, you don't need to legislate for that. But if we are really going to drive forward a world-leading vision, communication from local authorities is going to be key. When we talk about the scale of particularly residential growth needed to support these industries, you have to do it at a master developer, master planning level. The urban extensions, Thetford, I think we're 6,000 homes consented. Attleborough, another 4,000 homes.
5,000 in Thetford.
5 in Thetford, thank you, Chris. At kind of level, turning those spaces into places where you foster communities, these world-leading scientists and professionals, and equally the constituents we already have want to live, is a real challenge. How do you make those places people want to live? Where you see large-scale urban extensions elsewhere fall down is whilst infrastructure-led is key, without the community shops, without the village hubs, without the heart to those communities, are we really going to be attracting the people we need to support the economic growth we're talking in terms of jobs and industries?
I was going to make a couple of points. I completely agree with those. For what the biggest challenge of bringing forward urban extensions and development of that scale, and I think, in a sense, in Cambridge it's no different, is the upfront cost of infrastructure. Developments can be brought forward, but then you end in that absence of upfront infrastructure. But you end up making compromises. You don't get the settlement and the community that you want. So it is a national challenge. It's a national challenge which we would put out there to government to say we need better solutions. We need better solutions, I think, certainly for some of the developments around Cambridge, and part of the reason why, should we say, the plans to quadruple Cambridge size weren't universally received as a great move forward, because there's a little bit of cynicism amongst communities about that infrastructure piece. We as the County Council are working closely with Breckland colleagues on both Attleborough and Thetford. Breckland are the lead. We're very supportive, but just the sheer amounts of money that are required to bring forward some of these things is challenging, and that then, as a consequence, you then end up making compromises on the community piece. So I think that's important. And what I would say then, going back to the point about communities. So for me, some of these communities, we need to, in my view, if we're talking about the village shop, the village pub, and so on, how do we encourage local businesses, local entrepreneurs, and so on, to set up and be the businesses in these new settlements and so on. Then you don't then get a same town as everywhere feel. I'll give an example of North Walsham, where the district council's doing a heritage action zone within the town, and as part of the regeneration and so on, a number of new independent businesses have come and set up in that particular town and so on. And I think it's that how do we work with the local communities to take the advantage of opportunities that having a new settlement, their bakery, they could have another branch. How do we enable them to do it rather than Tesco just drop in or a big multiple and so on? How do we enable those? And then you feel that you've got a distinct community with identity and somewhere you really want to live.
Yeah, I think that's really, really key, Chris. And just to feed into that funding point, I think the case in point here is the dualling of the A11 has been seismic for the region. It has, yeah. Both in terms of residential development, but also for businesses like Paul's. And I think that will remain true, as all these large-scale urban extensions are going to be infrastructure-led. And so therefore, I think maybe fostering a different approach to development is going to be key. What we're looking at, one of the buzzwords around development at the minute, is patient capital. So removing that need for short-term profitable gain and saying, do you know what, I will invest, but I'm in it for the long term. And it's the agencies like Homes England, and I'm sure that's a podcast in itself as to some success stories and some to not, but the idea where you have long-term funding where actually your goal isn't immediate profits, but ultimate sustainable growth, I think could actually also be really helpful to the region as well, and foster some really exciting opportunities.
I don't want to get into the weeds of the relationship, and I'm looking slightly at Sarah now. I know the Crown Estate has been a part of the conversations around Thetford, and if there's an organisation that knows about patient capital, I suppose it must be the Crown Estate. But Paul, hearing what you've heard, and that there are businesses being displaced from Cambridge, and I assume that presents an opportunity in itself to the Snetterton Business Park. How ready, or how do you make yourself ready to rise to that? If you're, I'm making assumptions of your preparedness, but what do you do? How does that make you feel, and how do you react to that?
Well, I think it's a really exciting opportunity. We're currently working on a master plan for the whole site, and that's to provide a variety of accommodation from large-scale warehouses down to hybrid units, which are a mix of office, R&D space and warehousing and small-scale manufacture. I think what the region does struggle with a little bit is startups. We've got lower than average startup levels in terms of businesses setting up, but we do have a lot of SMEs, and I think we need to look to encourage those, provide collaborative environments, and create clusters really of businesses. That's my ambition, was always for the park to identify a niche and then have businesses move in that support each other and create their own ecosystem and thrive because each other are. And I think I'm starting to see interest and steps towards that. We're not there yet. We attracted Equipmake, who are have recently floated their electric motor R&D business, small scale manufacture, and I think there's an exciting opportunity around their growth. And we've attracted a company called Weimer, who do their agri-tech, so they call themselves cabbage polishers, but they produce machines that as my very basic understanding is they take vegetables out the field, clean them, wash them, bag them, weigh them. So we are starting to see these tech R&D businesses coming onto site. And we've also seen a number of businesses that have started in our smallest units, which are 1,000 square feet, moving into 2, 3, 4, 5,000 square feet. The challenge for us is doing a mixture of speculative builds, which are costly and risky, because someone could come in and go, well, I don't like what you built there, but can you change it? And then the D&B stuff, which takes time. Design and build.
Sorry, I'm sorry, crack down on TLAs.
Sorry. So, we've recently done a design and build for Hitachi. We attracted Hitachi construction machinery to the site. Wow. But you've got to a lot of people want instant gratification. They want to turn up, see a unit that's perfect for their needs, and they want to move into it because people leave it too late to look for space.
They always do, and that's right. And then end up having to compromise because it's it is challenging, and also with spec, how do you fund it? How do you finance it when it's and so on? And then do you ever produce the perfect unit for somebody? It's a real. You don't have enough demand. You don't have enough demand for it to be. If you had constant demand, a bit like in Cambridge, if you put some labs up, they'll go. You can do those as spec, but because you're attracting sort of not one-offs, it's more than one-offs. It's a slower flow. It's the maths is harder to justify.
It is, yeah. It's harder to guess what inquiry is going to come our way. You'd think that office space. Everyone's saying there's less demand for office space. Yet we've just built under a design and build. New offices for Pandasil, who are one of the region's largest professional services businesses. So I wouldn't have necessarily thought to build that on spec, and actually, if I had, it wouldn't have met their requirements. But I think it's exciting. You rewind back 5 years ago, Snetterton was 65,000 square feet of empty buildings. Yeah. We're probably touching on 100,000 square feet now, fully occupied. So with another 45 acres of land that's yet to be developed. So. And we're concentrating on building high quality space. I think that's something else the region struggles with. There's a lot of old space. It's not easy to bring up to today's standards with all the energy efficiencies that people are looking for. But new space, we're aiming for high energy, high efficiencies and top quality space. Yeah,
I've got some figures there because obviously it harks exactly what you're saying. Our summer 23 Norwich commercial data book just released on our website basically says there is a shortage of grade A accommodation, and the biggest need is in the area between 5 and 10,000 square feet range. So my advice to you would be to speak to Will Jones in our Norwich office, but flexibility will be the key on your site going forward because you need to be ready for demand. So basically it's buildings that are flexible for use and partitioning to be able to allow the start-ups to go to medium, to go to bigger. That's what happened in Cambridge in particular.
So Anna, it's easy to sit here and for me to encourage you all to be excited and excitable and dream the impossible dream. How do we then take this conversation and package it and get it out there in a way that excites people to look at Snetterton, excites people saying, okay, Cambridge is getting a bit too pricey for us, but we still want to be close to that ecosystem. Oh, Snetterton Park, that looks really exciting. How do we package that? I mean, I said this with Chris out here, but how do we do that? What's the way that you do would interest clients of Mills and Reeves?
Well, I think first and foremost, podcasts like this go a really long way. And I think initiatives like the LEP have been, absolutely fundamental to bringing the vision to where it is to date. I think for me, the leading, businesses we have in the region seem to want to and need to take it forward in facilitating those conversations. Part of what we at Mills and Reeve particularly are really passionate about is facilitating the roundtable conversations. Who are the people we know need to talk to each other? And I think you don't need to legislate for that. It's ironically not rocket science, but actually having people to spot the opportunities, to facilitate those conversations and to be proud of what we do. I think there's sometimes this inherently very, dare I say it, British sense of sensibility where we're not very good at vocalising what we do and what we've got. And I think by amplifying those conversations and giving the forums for them, that's where we drive a lot of growth as well.
I think that when I talked to Joe Graziano of Growth EQ, which is a C-level executive search outfit working in Cambridge and London, and I talked to him because of a thing he did at Cambridge Tech Week and Cambridge which is a kind of international front door for the Cambridge ecosystem. And he said something that really stuck with me, that was, if you approach Cambridge with an open mind, you'll be amazed at what you find. And I thought, wow. And people have said, oh, Cambridge is really hard to get engaged in. And I can't say I found it easy, but with effort and with the willingness to turn up, then you can absolutely get engaged in that. And it's been one of the great joys of doing Eastern Promise. But bringing these sort of alliances together, what part can someone like Bidwells play in that? Because we obviously Chris is here, and Chris knows all about bringing partnerships together. He's been doing that for a very long time. No. So how do we do that in a fresh way that gets partners interested? In a way that Cambridge don't think we're trying to steal their lunch, but actually collaboration is the word of the moment. No, nobody wants to be competing anymore. People want to collaborate.
Well, 36 years in town planning has taught me one big lesson. What you don't do is you don't go in cold. If you're going to put a big scheme in, you don't put a banger planning application, as we call it, without consultation. So the benefits and advantages is the fact that you go to the communities first, and you get them engaged, and you take the team with you to the villages and the settlements, and you put together a project team that's going to listen as well as talk about their proposals. There's a firm, I'll give them a bit of a name check, they're called Socius. They've done some brilliant work in Cambridge, and what they do is they take their vision and then they get feedback from what the community wants, and they try and build it into the scheme. So that's one way of doing it on a site-specific basis, and also at master plan level. But obviously, what you do need to do is have the collaboration between private sector, public sector, institutions, and academia. But what you said earlier about long-term play and not making a quick profit, that can be difficult to do if you're a private developer. But we find that the pension funds, London pension funds, there's a lot in Cambridge who are spending an awful lot of money on very big projects, knowing it's going to be 30 to 40 years before they get their returns. Now, of course, that's our money, that's our pension money. They're investing in that for the long term. Not many people can do that. So the developers have to work out what they can do to get that infrastructure in early. And if you're going to put the infrastructure in early, that's going to go down well with the local communities. What they don't want is just to see loads of houses or loads of industrial floor space with nothing for them. So
absolutely. I think fear is a huge issue in these developments, and it's perhaps being able to see things like you've got people working in the Cambridge ecosystem, living and working in, okay, let's say Thetford again, but what's that going to do for local schools? What's that going to do in terms of raising aspiration in the town? And if the overall attainment of a school goes up, then more and more people want to go to that school, and more people, et cetera, and it all snowballs into a really positive picture.
Can I come in there?
Oh, please do.
Because it's in my notes. As you know, Ros Bird, who's been on a previous panel, she's been in Cambridge, she's been at Snetterton, Silverstone Research Park. She's got that wonderful knowledge. One of her great beliefs is education, skills and apprenticeships. You see, in those communities, if you can get them at a young age and take them into higher education and then onto jobs, you've got a winning combination. It starts at that level. So it's for the long term in that respect as well.
Chris, I ask this with a slight hesitancy, but in terms of... I hope it's not overly controversial to say, and I say this for Sarah looking at me. I once had a conversation at an event, I think it was Sync the City, where a councillor, who shall remain nameless, said...
Sync in a good way, not...
Sync in with a Y, as in synchronise, not sync as in a torpedo, glug, glug, all hands lost. Who said, well, this sort of collaboration is all very well as long as it all comes back to Norfolk. And obviously politicians are going to care about their constituents and want the best for their constituents. So how do we create with them a consensual, that sounds a bit, consensual, inclusive, positive vision that doesn't get sunk in parochialism? Is that okay, Sarah? Thumbs are coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I mean, look, I think in life you have to recognise that everyone has an angle. So if you're a bank, guess what? You want to make money. If you're a developer, you want your developments filled. If you're a local councillor, you want to get re-elected and so on. So I think you have to recognise everyone comes from a different angle. If you're Cambridge, you want Cambridge to grow, and you're not that bothered about Norfolk, to be honest, because you're Cambridge. And if you're Norfolk, you're the same. So I think recognising that everyone has a different angle and a different input into the process, I think, is important, and not pretending that doesn't exist, but recognising that you've got an offer or a project or a plan that can tick as many of those boxes as possible in one go. So let's say Cambridge has a problem with overheating. A business in Cambridge can't find, let's call them AstraZeneca, who came to Cambridge and thought, do you know what, we haven't got homes for all our folk. Where are they all going to live? Well, actually, if you worked with Thetford on affordable housing and so on, then you've solved Cambridge's problem. You've created an opportunity for Thetford. So you've ticked several boxes in one go. What I would say, and one of the points I wanted to make, is that I think in terms of supporting Cambridge, entirely in favour of that, because it provides opportunities for folk in Norfolk. Exactly, okay, yeah. But also we mustn't allow those necklace towns to become just dormitory towns, because then you don't have a proper community in Thetford if people are just hopping on the train in the morning, disappearing, and then coming back and so on. Thetford and those towns need industry and need things of their own as well, which I think is important. So it's a kind of symbiotic relationship and so on. So so hopefully does that?
No, I think absolutely. I mean, you want people to have the community that they feel comfortable and happy with, and you don't want to just completely say, well, that doesn't matter because we want to help Cambridge and benefit for the win-win. But I believe that's supremely possible, and that places, I mean, Thetford has that growing cultural offer with Shakespeare at the Priory. That's the kind of sports events being broadcast at the Riverside on a big screen. That's exactly the kind of events we want to come see across. And I think Breckland's been really on the front foot in supporting those cultural events to build that community.
And I guess I always think, people in Cambridge are deprived of football. Come to Carrow Road if you want to see a team successful.
Now, I've got both teams on the podcast coming up, so that's very naughty, and they both did a fantastic job. So I'm making no comment. But what I'm going to do is just quickly go to Anna and Paul before I ask for a general roundup and what do we do? Where do we go from here with this conversation? But before we do that, just ask for Anna to just reflect on that, or from kind of your legal standpoint. What's the okay? We'll jump straight to it then. What's the next step? What is the practical thing that we can do to take this conversation, support those elements that are already in train, and move forward?
I mean, as a typical lawyer, I'm probably going to say the solution isn't necessarily a legal one. I think there are things that, we can do to facilitate it. I think around making sure the legal structures in terms of placemaking for communities really work in fostering those communities, like Chris has touched on. So there are things like, as you well know, community interest companies, community land trust, those kind of things, which will give a sense of placemaking to those communities. And I think also Rob's point about attracting the pension funds in is going to be really key as well, because these infrastructure-led projects do need a very specific kind of investment to get them off the ground and get them going. So
Chris, just quickly, and I'll come to Paul, how would Norfolk County Council and partners go about sort of packaging that and attracting those? I'm assuming those conversations may already be trained. I don't know, but just how would Norfolk County Council like to see such a thing evolve?
So we operate as a facilitator in the same way that Sarah and colleagues at Breckland do, working closely together, so bringing different partners together and so on. So for me, there's something about ensuring we have particularly private sector businesses who have an interest, who see potential. We have to show them the potential, and for them then to, in a sense, take and make the next steps, recognising that does sometimes, and particularly in infrastructure firms, there's a case for public investment to pump prime in order to unlock the longer term private capital. So for me, it's about making sure we've got identified who are all the actors in this space, and getting them talking, getting them collaborating, getting them cooperating, and so on, and bringing them bringing them on tours to see Paul's site.
Absolutely. So, Paul, you've got a site with exciting potential. You've got a master plan coming forward. How are you going to sort of drive that forward and sort of market that?
Well, I think I want to say thank you to you, Mike, for arranging this conversation. It's made me think about a lot of things, even just in this short period of time. But what we need to do now is collaborate and really sort of take this vision and turn it into reality. And I think, I obviously need to be talking to Chris. I haven't done, but I need to. And I need to be engaging with more businesses and getting other people as excited as we are about this opportunity. And
you're just remind me, Paul, of your Snetterton Business Park website.
SnettertonPark.co.uk.
Oh, right. Go on, make it better. So, for anyone listening who thinks, I want to be part of this conversation, I have something really positive to contribute, or you want to be put in touch with anybody you've heard on the panel today, Mike at easternpromise.site, SITE. That's Mike at easternpromise.site, or you can go to easternpromise.org.uk, follow the link to contact, and bung me an email that way. Rob, this has been an extremely exciting and interesting discussion, I think. And I'm really excited about this being just the first two of hopefully more roundtables that people can take part of. What would you like us to do going forward? What is the next step that, one, this podcast can take and people listening who want to be involved?
Well, a lot of great work was undertaken by the LEP, and we know that the future of the LEPs are very much in doubt with the government movements. Planning legislation is very weak at the moment. It's very localist view. There's no strategic planning of any note. There might be a new government coming soon. There's a couple of things I wanted to mention. Branding and vision. We did branding of the ARC, as we called it then, the Oxford to Cambridge ARC. So for international investors, they need to see what it's all about. What does it mean? What does the corridor actually mean? What does it say? Because people won't know what it is. It's a concept. So you have to brand it. You have to get branding to say, this is the piece we're looking at. And at more local level, Breckland, as it were, from a regional level down to a local level, you've got the local plan. You've got the economic officers here. So you need to look at it at all levels. You need to get people together. As I say, national planning legislation is weak about collaboration across authorities, but you don't worry about that. You need to crack on with it anyway. And there is a way of doing those partnerships, but you've got to have government at central level being interested as well. So you've got to go to central government to get some funding, for infrastructure. But working with private sector, developers, and institutions and academia, I think you've got to bring them all together regularly at workshops just to get the thing moving and understand what it is you're trying to do.
Yeah, I can't do better than that. I'm not gonna sit here and splutter and stutter. Anna,
I think it's about amplifying what's already here and contributing to that conversation around branding that Rob's alluded to. We have got some world-leading businesses, startups already in Cambridge and Norwich. And I think the professional services that are also here have got a role to play in bringing that all together.
Chris, draw to a close this first chapter, or first two chapters in the story.
I found this a really stimulating discussion. I'm heartened by continued appetite and belief in the tech corridor concept, particularly from private sector colleagues. So, as the public sector, we're there to support, enable, and where there's a will, there's a way.
My thanks to Matthew Samways, Paul Downing, Anna Aldous, Councillor Sarah Suggitt, Rob Hopwood and Chris Starkie for those enjoyable, absorbing and encouraging discussions. This is a subject to which Eastern Promise will return. If you're in the Cambridge area or in this piece of Norfolk, you like what you've heard and you want to get involved in future discussions, audio tours or workshops, then do reach out via LinkedIn. My name's Mike Rigby and my DMs are open. Via the contact function at easternpromise.org.uk or by emailing me at mike@easternpromise.site. And now, Here at Eastern Promise, we don't fatten the pig on market day, lest the bottom drops out of it. So let's see who's in the market for markets in another crowd-pleasing...
Crowd sorcery.
Yes, crowd sorcery. Arguably, Norwich Market is the most famous market in our region, with its wide variety of stalls and the colourful roofs of the permanent kiosks stretching from City Hall and St Peter Street to Gentleman's Walk. But that's not the only market the region has to offer. Oh no! Tom Abbott of Green Easy and Abbott Feudali Investments offers a suggestion to which you may want to return in a month or two. The Christmas market in Bury St Edmunds is always wonderful, says Tom. Burnham Market has one also. Do you know, I do wonder if you should still be able to use the suffix market if you don't actually have one, Tom. And so I'm glad that Burnham Market does. Your move, Pullham Market. Tom would also like to know a good farmers market out there that provides sustainability in produce and organic certification. There you go, crowd sorcerers. The challenge has been issued. Next, we welcome Sophie Skipp, Head of Energy Skills at Eager, the East of England Energy Group, to the magic circle of crowd sorcerers. And she wants to sing the praises of Norwich's premier street market. She says, of course! Norwich Market is a great example. I love the mix of shoe repair, fruit and veg, all mixed with mushy peas and Donbury bowls. Not that Sophie is averse to looking further afield, and like Tom Abbott, she's fond of the market at Bury, which Sophie says has that traditional feel that keeps a town centre thriving, adding, I stumbled across the Holt Market 2 weeks ago and did have a little impulse purchase. Personally, I can't wait to see what the new facilities for Great Yarmouth's Market will deliver for the sense of civic identity. So important, Sophie. So important. But Norwich is still top of the shops when it comes to one particular purchase, says Sophie. Is there, she asks, a better place to buy a portion of chips? A few years ago, I was made redundant, and following a very positive meeting with Rebecca Headen at R13 Recruitment, treated myself to the first of many portions of chips on Norwich Market. Sitting in the sunshine, looking over the striped canopies, I felt so much better about the future. Well, a key actor in that anecdote, Rebecca Headen, director and co-founder at R13 Recruitment, adds more to the tale. That's a lovely memory, Sophie Skipp, she says. Norwich Market has levelled up! I think that's how the kids say it. It's a mega food and drink hub, and you can also find some absolute treasures on there. And looking forward to hearing more about the progress of Great Yarmouth Market. Do you know, I do feel we are intruding on a treasured memory here when Sophie concludes, Rebecca, the bodega sandwiches were so fat, I got mayo on top of my big glasses. Ha 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 ha, responds Rebecca, they are epic. Thana Assad, meanwhile, digital marketing, translation and skills training specialist based in the Cambridge area, adds to the stripy-roofed love-in. I've been to Norwich Market and I really liked it, she says. Do you know, that's the bit I love, when we share what we love about other parts of our region. Lastly, we have Adam Peed, business development strategist for Inuti and the brains behind the Connected project at adampeed.com. Adam says, the evolution of the food on Norwich Market is incredible, especially brick pizza. I do miss the 30p mug of tea we used to get in my student days, though. I lived in Ely for a few years, and the different markets are excellent. No argument here, Adam. And with that, it's time to pull down the shutters on episode 76 of the Eastern Promise podcast. Next week, to quote Matt Damon in The Martian, we'll be sciencing the shit out of the east of England, with a visit to the Quadram Institute. I don't think they've tried to grow potatoes, if you will, at the QI, but it's surely just a matter of time. I'll be chatting to the newly and rightly begonged Professor Ian Charles, OBE, and walking around the Quadram Institute in sound, along with our guide, Andrew Stronach, and a special guest, Dr. Tammy Dugan, Life Science and Healthcare Partnerships Lead for the University of Cambridge. Tammy, an immunologist by training, could not be a better person, generally, but also to share her expert view on one of the most exciting and fascinating scientific and healthcare institutions in the east of England, if not the UK, if not Europe, both today and tomorrow. Spoiler alert! She rather likes it. That's all coming next week on episode 77 of the greatest podcast on the east of England, hosted by a lapsed ginger Mancunian that's lapsed on both fronts. It only remains for me to repeat both my thanks to the panel, to Breckland Council, our hosts, and to repeat my call for anyone who wants to be part of this positive conversation going forward to get in touch. Thank you to all my crowdsourcerers and to our sponsors, the truly wonderful folk at Mills and Reeve. It's an honour, people. Thank you to Engineer 49, Darth Vader himself, whose deep knowledge of the Force brought to you this week's amazing panels on the A11 corridor. And to you, thank you for joining me, and I hope to have your company again next week. Until then, bye for now. The Eastern Promise podcast is a Priorscroft production for the Eastern Promise Community Interest Company and was brought to you in association with Mills and Reeve, achieving more together. You can contact Eastern Promise and find out more about what we do by visiting our website, easternpromise.org.uk.